John, I think it went back. Okay. John, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. You are live with the Justice Team on the Consumer Legal Hour show here with Intellectual Radio and iHeartRadio. You are live with Justina Winfrey and John Carter. Mr. Carter.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, rather. It's good to be here again. It's sunny Tuesday evening. It's sunny in California anyway. I don't know what the weather is like there.
Oh, it's not too bad. But we're so thankful to have you on the line with us. We want to go ahead and say thank you so very much to our sponsor. It's Keegan Ignatic Water, I believe, Mr. Carter.
Yeah, Keegan Water. That is a excellent resource that if you have little ailments and little things that bother you, or you just need a refreshing rejuvenation from the water that you drink, Keegan Water that's made by Enagic, the Enagic company, is the water that you want to be drinking. It has also been known to help people with type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, or things like that. It doesn't cure, it's not a cure-all, but it just makes people feel better that have suffered with those types of symptoms. So Keegan Water is a great source of rejuvenation for those people that have those type of issues.
Excellent. So we wanted to briefly touch on, and you know what, actually we have some feedback coming in right now. I believe we have someone calling in by the name of Valencia Dantzler.
Okay, great.
Okay, wonderful.
Is she on the line?
Yes, she is. Okay, one moment. Hi, Valencia Dantzler, Mama Diva.
Hello?
Hi, Valencia Dantzler, Mama Diva. You're live with the Justice Team on the Consumer Legal Hour. How are you?
Hello, is this Intellectual Radio?
Yes, this is. Please hold one moment. Thank you. Hi, Mr. Carter.
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
I think our line switched. That was we're actually getting the getting Miss Dantzler on the line. But let's go ahead and move forward with our discussion. One of the main things that we wanted to talk about tonight, and at some point we'll get Ms. Danzer back on the line, we wanted to discuss the expungement and sealing component along with the prison system situation. So why don't we go ahead and open up with the prison situation, prison reform potentially, and what the community needs to know?
Well, from the hubbub that's out there from the Republican camp is that the Trump administration is seeking to privatize prisons. Now, not that hasn't already been done, because in large part, there are a lot of states that already have programs where the sheriff's offices are no longer running the prisons. They're really done by private security people because they're private companies. Some of them may even contract with the sheriff to provide a law enforcement component to put guards in those prisons. It may or may not be a part of the sheriff's office. Usually, in large parts, they're not. They're a part of a private security agency. The thing about privatizing prisons is that the monies that pay for that, believe it or not, still comes largely from taxpayers, or it comes from counties. All they did was shift the burden. So if a person, for example, in Cook County is going to go to jail or end up going to a prison, and if that prison is privatized, rather than federal tax dollars paying for that prison, if the county of Cook is sending that person to that state prison, which is privatized, then the county will be providing the resources to pay for that inmate's care, custody, and control. That is why a lot of prisons, a lot of jails, a lot of law enforcement agencies like county attorney offices have decided to start releasing folks that are nonviolent offenders, because it gets quite costly to incarcerate a person under those type of circumstances when the county has to take that money out of its budget to pay to house someone and provide, 24-hour medical care and feeding them and rehabilitating them and everything else. It can get quite costly. Notice, though, when that burden was on the U.S. taxpayer, it just had no limits. I mean, they would keep people in jail for as long as they made coffee, and it wouldn't matter, because there was a financial incentive to the sheriff's office, for one, who got paid for doing that, or whatever other agencies that were out there doing it on behalf of the state. But now pretty much they're all privately contracted. The other thing about private contracts is that you'll find that they don't necessarily have the same exact liabilities as government agencies do. One example that I'm going to use is not exactly dealing with the prisons. One example is the Internal Revenue Service is now contracting with private vendors, private collection agencies like Trans World Systems, for example, to go out and start collecting debts or past tax debts from taxpayers that owe, under, let's say, $10,000. So if the tax debt is less than $10,000, they will allow those small debts to be collected by these outside collection agencies that they contract with. The problem with that is that under federal law, if there are provisions that the taxpayer is entitled to, like, for example, if a taxpayer just cannot pay the tax debt, then the Internal Revenue Service is obligated to look at that person's budget, and if they determine that that person cannot pay without it producing an undue hardship, then they have to offer to move that debt to an uncollectible status or non-collectible status. And that will stay that way from year to year. It'll be reviewed every year when they file another tax return. And if the person's financial situation hasn't changed much, eventually the debt will hit the statute of limitations and it'll be gone, and the IRS can just never collect it. But if from one tax year to the next tax year, you were still pretty much in the same financial condition and you owed money on that next tax year, that will also be rolled into a non-collectible status. However, if a private collection agency has been contracted by the government to collect that debt, they are not under any obligation under any law to give the taxpayer that kind of relief, or to even offer the taxpayer that, or tell them that, unlike the Internal Revenue Service. So even if the collection agency knows and can see from the budget that having this person to pay on this debt or to pay it back at all would be an undue hardship, they can still make arrangements and force some type of payment arrangement with that individual to pay on the debt. In other words, that private collection agency will not be obligated to disclose to the person that the debt can actually be put into an uncollectible status or uncollected status. And that way they can continue to harass them. The federal prison system is going to the same type of situation, in that if you privatize these prisons, there are certain rights that an inmate would have against certain types of government intrusions. If the sheriff's office or the deputy or the state comes in, even though a lot of their rights are taken away, but they still have some constitutional protections. Remember, constitutional protections go against state actors. So is this person employed by the state, or they're an agent of the state, or whatever? Imagine if they were a private company, it's going to fall under some different rules here. Just like a collection agency that's collecting a debt for a third party falls under the rules of the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. Even if it's a law firm trying to collect it, they'll fall under the rules of the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. However, if that company has its own internal collection department and they're calling you or whatever and saying those same things that a collection agency would say and committing the same types of violations, that law does not apply, because they're not a third-party agency collecting debts on behalf of another. They're collecting their own debts internally. So we have to be careful when we talk about privatizing prisons, because it can really jeopardize the rights that a lot of these folks have when it comes to their health, their welfare, and their protection within those prison walls. The upside is, because it gets so expensive, they'll probably be released early. The downside is that you can lose your life in that prison and the state not be held responsible for it.
Okay. That's extremely interesting. And I'm sure a lot of the consumers out there don't realize that these debt collectors, as they're coming after them, they don't realize that they have options to basically force the debt collectors to explain exactly what the debt is. And if the debt is outdated, they have legal options to not have to pay, not pay that debt.
Right. That's exactly right. Because, if a debt has been outstanding for more than 4 years, and the collection agency never sued on it, never got a judgment, and they're coming after you 4 years later, I mean, they can still call you. They can send you a dunning letter. They can do whatever, but they can't sue in court for the debt. It's too old. So that's called latches. So they set on their right. Where they could have brought a claim, they failed to do so. And, on the federal law, you can't have a person that has a debt hanging out there forever. Here in this country, it goes back to an old biblical axiom called the year of Jubilee. In the Bible days, the children of Israel experienced this 7-year debt forgiveness period of time called Jubilee. So every 7 years, whatever indebtedness that you had to someone was forgiven. Well, that's kind of how our debt collection system is set up on that same Christian principle. That's why every 7 years, anything that's on a credit report after 7 years can be deleted from that credit report, because that's your year of Jubilee. So it's a biblical principle that the United States government has adopted. So never believe this foolishness about the separation between church and state. There's a lot of things that are parallel to things in the Christian faith, and that has everything to do with the church than anything else. And you can thank your Catholic counterparts for that, because the Pope and the Vatican is his own little country, his own little world, his own little kingdom that helped to set up and establish a lot of this stuff eons back when they first got started, after the days that the Roman Empire fell. But anyway, in the year of Jubilee, when those debts are forgiven, you can start over again. And that's the same principle that we do. Bankruptcies survive for 10 years, but the average debt is only for 7. And a collection agency that has not tried to collect the debt and get a person to pay within 4 years under most state statutes, a few of them is 5, they can't sue you.
Okay.
Now, here's something else people need to know. You are under no obligation whatsoever to talk with, negotiate with, agree to pay, sign a contract with the debt collection agency. You can call your original creditor, which is best to do, and say, I will pay you this debt. And when the debt collector calls you, say, hey, you know what? I forgot all about that. Thank you so much for reminding me. But you know what, honey? It's my personal policy that I don't deal with third-party collection agencies. I didn't sign a contract with you. You didn't provide any services to me. I have no nexus to you in this whole transaction. I will call the original creditor. And if they say that they purchased the debt, that they purchased it, and so you have to deal with them, tell them to send you that in writing. Because if they purchased it and they tell you that, and they send you the contract where they purchased it, well, they won't do that, number one. But in case you find one that's foolish enough to do it, just know that whatever they purchased it for, it was nearly 30 cents on a dollar. So if that was the situation, you never want to pay way beyond or above what, 30 cents on the dollar, whatever you actually owed them, because they negotiated that down. You can negotiate it even further with them, even if it's to their loss. That's just too bad.
So, John, I just wanted to jump in because we have Valencia Danzler on the line right now, and we were hoping that she could call in, and she did give us a call. So, Miss Danzler, you're live with the Justice Team.
Hi there.
We wanted to say thank you so much for calling in, and we wanted to let all of our listeners know about the upcoming event at the Daly Center here in Chicago.
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Valencia Danzler. My stage name is Mother Diva, and I'm the official Madam Ambassador of House Music. And I'm producing and hosting a Women's Unity Day House Music Dance Celebration Peace Rally, which is going to be Friday, March 10th at the Daly Plaza from 11:45 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. And Justine Winfrey, of course, is one of our fabulous guest speakers. We also have Black Girls Rock Award recipient, community activist Amina Matthews, and the clerk of the Circuit Court of Cook County, the Honorable Dorothy Brown. And we also have representatives from the Chicago Metropolitan Breast Cancer Task Force and also the Illinois Endometriosis Awareness Project. So the purpose of this event is for all women to come together and unite. We stand on the shoulders of great women that have come before us, including our great-grandmothers, our grandmothers, our mothers, and now looking into the future with our daughters. So the point is to come together in unity, whether you are pro-choice or pro-life, alternative lifestyle, whatever your race is, religion, if you're Republican, Democrat, Green Party, as long as you're a woman, and even if a drag queen stole your ovaries, if you all want to come, that's fine with me too. So we just want to come together and celebrate and embrace the power of womanhood, because there are so many stereotypes and images in the community about us as women, how we are a divided community and we don't stick together. If you look at the reality shows, you see all the women fighting and the guys are just sitting back, chilling. So I want to kind of break that stereotype and say, we can come together. We can be in unity. We may have differences, but our differences and our uniqueness is what binds us together as one. I know it's going to be a little chilly out there, but with all that good music, we have DJ Lady D, DJ Lovebug, all female DJ review. I think that we'll move forward with it, and we're going to get along just fine and just celebrate being a woman. Hashtag Women Matter.
Absolutely. Sounds extremely exciting, and I look forward to it this Friday, 12 p.m. to 2:30.
On Facebook, if you go on Facebook and put in Women's Unity Day, it should come up. But it's also information on my blog, which is motherdivashow.wordpress.com.
Can you repeat that for us one more time?
Yes, www.motherdivashow, MOTHERDIVA show, SHOW.wordpress.com. And also, Justina, I wanted to let you all know to definitely look for the TV commercials. They're airing on CLTV from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Tuesday morning, which was today, but Wednesday morning and Thursday morning. Also at noon on the WGN app.
Okay.
And we also have commercials running on 106.3 as well. So Justina, your picture is in the TV spot. So look for yourself.
Excellent. Excellent. Again, this is an exciting event this Friday. Women united together, encouraging each other, loving each other, embracing each other, and loving our communities, empowering each other, and sharing resources. Thank you so much, Mother Diva Valencia Danzler, for joining us this evening. And again, can we get that website one more time if you all...
Yes. motherdivashow.wordpress.com.
Excellent. And the Facebook page for the event.
Yes, you would go on Facebook and put in the search box, Women's Unity Day House Music. If you put those keywords in there, Women's Unity Day House Music, the event should pop up in your search box, and then you can click on it and add yourself to the invitation.
Ladies, bring your gym shoes, come out, bring your lunch in a bag, and come dance off a few pounds, and let's have fun and encourage each other and love each other. Thank you again, Mother Diva, Miss Valencia Danzler. God bless you. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you Friday. Bye-bye. Okay, Mr. Carter.
Yep, I'm still here.
Awesome.
That should be an interesting event for the community. Hopefully it will be very well supported.
Yes. And they usually are. Yes, and they usually are. The environment and the atmosphere. It's very welcoming, and I've attended several events at the Daily Center out in the open, and it's usually very nice. So no complaints. Moving right along. The last thing that we touched on was the fact that the collection agencies, they'd ultimately have to prove up the fact that if it's a debt beyond 4 years, they need to show that they still have a right to collect on it.
Yes, that is correct. That is correct. In most jurisdictions, it's 4 years. So they will have to show that they still have the standing of the right to collect on that debt, but it has to be within that statutory period of time. If it's outside of that, they can still try to collect it. They can ask you for the money. The only difference is that they can never really sue on it. So any of the threats that they make, which cause a lot of people to run to the bankruptcy court, are meaningless. You know, just like the deadlines, you'll see a lot of times they'll send you a letter that says that you have 15 days to respond to this. Otherwise, you know, the debt is going to be considered as valid. But when you look at the bottom of the letter, on the back of it, it says that, you know, there's a 30-day validation. So if they give you a date to respond that's less than the 30 days, that's supposed to be in a validation notice. And if there isn't a validation notice in a collection letter, then that's a violation. If they give you a shorter time than the 30 days in the body of that letter, that's in the validation language at the bottom, that's also a violation. And so the Federal Trade Commission fines them $1,000 per day per violation. So if you have a collection agency that's sending you DUNS and their validation notices, you need to keep those, because each letter, each violation is worth $1,000. If they're calling you, leaving messages on your machine, or they call you more than 3 times in one day about a debt that they're trying to collect, their third-party agency, every call after that third one in a 24-hour period is a violation. So you just need to be able to document it and prove it, because each time that phone rings, for each done that comes, that's a violation, is $1,000. And remember, it's $1,000 per day per violation. So that can rack up pretty good. When I was doing debt collection defense, I would have collection agencies that would be coming after a client of mine for $5,000 or $6,000. And originally, they might owe a credit card debt, and the credit card debt was originally $1,500. but they add all of their fees and costs and expenses. It's usually usury, which I have a real problem with. And so they're trying to collect $5,000 or $6,000 on a $1,500 original debt. So what I would do is have the client to collect that information, and I would end up suing that debt collection agency for anywhere between $30,000 to $50,000. And we've never lost one. I mean, we didn't always collect the $30,000 to $50,000 because the collection agency will quickly come to its knees and have a come to Jesus meeting and want to negotiate the price down. But we would usually settle them for between $15,000 and $25,000. We would do that. But the bottom line is that the client never had to come out of pocket to do that. It's a quite lucrative practice for attorneys that are on the consumer side or on the debtor side of debt collection. There's a lot of folks, Ms. Winfrey, that also file bankruptcies. And a year or two after filing bankruptcy, they'll get a letter from a collection agency on a debt that was actually filed in bankruptcy. That's a huge violation. I mean, because that violates Section 362 of the United States Bankruptcy Code. And there can be some serious repercussions and consequences for violating Section 362. So, and it doesn't matter how large or small the debt was. So you just need to have an attorney that's close, that is familiar with these things, that you can go to if you're having these kind of problems. The other thing that debt collectors try to get folks to do, and they'll call you and say, oh, well, we just want to work with you to get this done, and we're willing to negotiate with you. And if you don't have the money today, you can post-date a check. You know, one of the most irresponsible things that you can do is to post-date a check to a collection agency. There's no obligation, no law, no requirement that you post-date a check to pay anyone anything ever. And I would encourage you not to do that. Now, there are penalties against them if they should happen to negotiate that check prior to the date that you had on it. But it's just a hassle of having to go through and get everything corrected because they tried to negotiate it sooner than than that date was.
So speaking of negotiating,
because things change in your life from week to week, and they try to get the money and it isn't there, it just creates other problems.
So since we're coming up on time right now, since we are dealing with violations and negotiating, we've run into a situation here in Cook County where it seems that they have an annual event, and I'm actually thankful that Clerk Brown will be speaking on Friday, because she hosts and sponsors an annual event, sometimes semi-annual event, for expungement and sealing. And one of the big issues that we've come across right now is the fact that many of the people who stand in those really, really long lines at the churches, at the community centers, every 6 months or annually, they walk out, they're thankful that they're able to expunge and seal their records. What we're finding is a year, maybe 2, sometimes 3 years later, the Illinois State Police and the Attorney General's office, they're coming back and saying, and let me give full disclosure, we are not attorneys. If you need legal advice, please contact a lawyer for legal advice in your jurisdiction. We cannot stress that enough. But what we are finding is that the Illinois State Police and the Attorney General's office, they're coming back and saying, pursuant to 20 ICLS 2630/52 A3D and C2F, that case is not sealable and or expunged. It cannot be expunged. Unfortunately, many of the defendants, they are not present. They have not been notified. And if they have been notified, they haven't gone to court. It's not in their best interest not to show up for court, because they have an attorney ready and willing to not properly defend them. And that would be the legal aid. I witnessed people not present in court, and the attorney who represented the legal aid for the defendants stand before the court and say, well, Your Honor, I did not meet with the defendant, but the plaintiff did send a copy of the motion to them, so it is in order for, and they went forward with the order, and ultimately this poor defendant, completely oblivious to what's going on, has an attorney that they never met with sign off on their behalf saying that their case is now unsealed, that their case is no longer expunged.
Well, let me ask you a question though. How is it? And I know that, you know, I know things in Illinois are just really, really different, or can be. I don't know why, but they are. How is it that an attorney who has never met with a client that makes that declaration in court, nor is the client present there, can do anything standing in their shoes or make any agreement when they have already acknowledged to the court that they had not met with the client? Well, that's a huge ethical violation, and is usually grounds for an attorney to be suspended, reprimanded, or even disbarred. How is that possible? And why are the folks in Illinois allowing that to happen? That's a larger question.
Now, on May 3rd, 2017, there will be a room full of expungement and sealed cases that none of us as the public can currently look up right now, because guess what? All of those cases are sealed and expunged according to the court record. But according to the Illinois State Police and the Attorney General's office, those cases are still pending. So in certain situations, we've found that the public cannot locate the case because according to the courts, according to everyone else that was CC'd, State's Attorney's Office, Attorney General's Office, Illinois State Police, these records should be sealed and or expunged. Well, we're finding that the Illinois State Police and the Attorney General's Office, they're not following the order of the court, meaning they are still leaving those records open for the public, for the fingerprinting process, even though the court has said this is sealed and or expunged as of right now, regardless of the issue that, you know, of them appealing that or objecting to it after the fact. Now, I get that within the law, certain statutes permit an additional 2 years, but that's not a catch-all. That doesn't give the Attorney General's office a catch-all option. So this A3D 20 ICLS 263052 A3D, I challenge everyone to take a moment and go online and pull up the clerk of the court's forms and pull up the objection for expungement and sealing. And it's a 2-page general form. And if you scroll down and you look at a certain section, you'll see 20 ICLS 26352 A3D. You'll also see C2F. Within that section, you'll see an area where you can write why this particular group is objecting to your expungement or sealing. Within that section, the law should be contained there, not an explanation off the top of the head of an attorney. That's not acceptable. So I challenge everyone who has records that have been expunged and sealed. If in fact you do get called back into court, make sure that you hire a private attorney Read your documents thoroughly. Research the laws that they are citing. You absolutely cannot believe this free attorney who is telling you go with the attorney general's office. They're not working on your behalf. I did see one guy in there. He tried. I'll give him that much. But for the most part, those other attorneys that were in there speaking on behalf of the defendants, they were not wholeheartedly there. People were asking them, is there anything else I can do? I calculated the time. They didn't respond timely. I heard a man asking the attorney from Cabrini Legal Aid. And actually, I believe her name, off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly, but what I will say is she told him, I calculate I calculate this type of information every day. This is what I do for a living. It is not from the time that the court, the time starts when the Illinois State Police receive the petition. And that's not true. The time starts from the time that stamp is stamped on the document. That's when the clock starts. So if the Illinois State Police, if they're saying that they're receiving these documents a month later, why is it that everyone else managed to receive, including the clerk's office, the clerk of the court, they're sealing these cases, but the Illinois State Police, they're not receiving the mail timely? Something's wrong with our mail system then, huh?
Well, I think something's wrong with the whole process. I think something's wrong with the people that's down there administrating these issues. And there's definitely sound like something's wrong with this public defender's office, if that's what it really is, or this legal aid office. It sounds like the legal aid aids the state in sending people to jail, but setting them up for failure of making sure that they don't get jobs. Yeah, people need to become very educated about the law and find out these new provisions that are passed for ex-felons and everything else. If the court ordered a document to be sealed and that's been fully adjudicated and that person hasn't done anything criminally to cause that case to be opened back up or time added, how does the Illinois State Police have the authority to go back years later and have a hearing that seems like it's an annual thing, an annual date? That sounds crazy. It's like almost having like a picnic.
Right. You haul them all in, you herd all the cattle in, and then you slaughter them later, basically. And that's what's going on. And this is where I want to jump in because we only have a few more minutes. I need for our listeners to really pay close attention to what is going on in the city of Chicago. If these records are being unsealed and these records are ultimately not being expunged, that data is going into that algorithm database, okay? I need for our community to really understand and realize what's going on. They're not explaining what the algorithm database really means. Those crimes, those potential crimes, those unsealed cases, those formerly sealed cases are now unsealable, which means that those cases and those crimes go into the database now. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it seems that we are potentially setting up a pathway for more people to go into prison. And it honestly, it reminds me of Minority Report. The movie Minority Report.
You know, what folks have to realize is that if you look at the trends, this country is starting to go backwards, especially for people of color who are of Negro descent. I don't care what you call yourself or how you think people view you. If you think that this present administration is going to do you any favors, you better think again. And remember, like we talked about last time, the Civil Rights Act is a set of legislation that gets voted on every 10 years by Congress, or whether or not they're going to allow that act to continue to be good law. It's the only one that's out there that Congress votes on every 10 years, and it specifically got its roots in dealing with folks of color. Now you have a Congress that's largely Republican and based in majority control that you haven't had in a very, very, very long time, that's going to be making those decisions. And you see that this present administration has the expertise in
Wonderful. Well, our time is up this evening. Thank you so much for tuning in live with the Justice Team on Intellectual Radio, iHeartRadio, Mr. John Carter and Justina Winfrey. See you next week. God bless.